Hello and welcome to the Qreative Life podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Qureshi, but you can call me Q. Welcome back to the Qreative Life podcast. I am here with my friend and fellow creative, Joe Hunter, who we recorded already at one point. We recorded this podcast, but we had technical difficulties. And so we're back for round two, which means that this is actually going to be perfect, right, Joe?
Of course, absolutely perfect. Hello, glad to be
We
back.
had we had a whole rehearsal. Um, I'm glad we get to do it again, only because I get to talk to you again, which is always a treat. It's a good
Well, likewise,
excuse.
a whole nother hour. Great. Cool.
And you're such a good sport. Okay, so let's talk to you. Let me just tell the folks who you are. So Joe is somebody I met through, I think, Eileen, my bestie, who is also one of our creative people. When I first met you, you were living in Austin. Now you live in a smaller town in the Texas Hill Country,
Yeah, we're
and
out of
you're
Kerrville.
Carvel, right?
Yeah.
So you're one of those interesting people who likes to just fuck around and find out, right? I think I've said this to you before. You remind me of, these old timey sort of mad scientist types, like who was the guy in Around the World in 80 Days? Phileas,
Jules
Phileas
Verne.
Fogg. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who just like you think of, you're like, I want to try this thing, I want to make this thing, and then you do it. So you've got a house full of crazy equipment, and every time I turn around, you're making something new, and you're also doing something quite different from most of the people I interview, in that you're not just a artist, a creator, but you're also a designer and you're kind of an engineer. Is there anything
I,
I've left
I
out of your,
think,
I mean, immense
yeah, that
qualification?
seems about right. I mean, I definitely, I mean, I think I said this to you before, but I definitely have one foot in art and one foot in science, and I always have. I mean, I did a degree in material science and technology, which is basically metallurgy, ceramics, polymers, that kind of thing. And then, of course, like everybody else, went into web coding because it was the dawn of the internet at the time. So it was around the time of COVID, and the website that I was looking after was pretty much developed, and I was keeping it ticking over. So I had less to do. And of course, you know how the world was back then. And my husband, bless him, Alan, he said to me, you should buy a laser completely out of the blue. And I'm like, okay. So we spent 6 months researching lasers, and I ended up with a dirty, great big 60-watt CO2 laser sitting in the middle of our dining room, as you do.
Wow. Yeah, not me, but you.
And with this beast, I was able to cut wood and acrylic and paper and leather and, mostly organic materials. And I would start making things. And I started making model planes at first. My first thing that I did was a little model Spitfire because, hey, I'm British origin and it just, I like planes. We'll get
Yes.
to the planes part, but yes, planes are a big thing. So that was the first thing I made. And then a long, long time ago, so I used to do fused glass, and I technically, well, I still have the equipment here, but I haven't used it in a while. It's all covered in other stuff at the moment. You know how garages get. And back then, I was making fused glass things. I wanted to make a sundial for the garden. So I got some software that told you how to make sundials, and I drew it all out and I made the sundial, and it still sits out there today. And that software also did astrolabes, which are 1,000-year-old computers, analog computers that give you the timings and positions of the sun and stars. And I thought, well, that looks cool, but I can't make that yet. And then this is like 6 years before I got the laser. And then when I got the laser, I thought, oh, I could make that astrolabe. Let's have a go. So I
Mhm.
made one and it was cool. And then I thought, I could put this on Etsy and see if anybody else would like it. So I did, and apparently they do. And now I have this nice little niche market selling astrolabes all over the world. People want them. It's kind of out there, but this is what I ended up doing. So
I
that
love that.
yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying it. I've met some really interesting people, and I've got some great customers, and some of them are really into it and they've taught me lots of things. And It's just really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's so interesting for many, many reasons. One, I just want to say that I'm very happy that you have a partner in life who encourages you to buy lasers because if you're a creative, no, I'm serious. If you're a creative person, like it really helps to have somebody who's like, yeah, try it, do it, it'll be cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's awesome. And then just the fact that I love it when people end up in an unexpected place because what that tells me about them is that they are the type of person who, I guess, follows a creative instinct. Like there's so one of the hardest things for me as a creative person is to not talk myself out of things or immediately veto things. Like I'll think, well, I wonder if I could do that. And then I'll be like, nah, you don't have any business doing that. Why would you do that? Right. And uh and it's a terrible, terrible habit. Whereas, you see this astrolabe thing and you're like, that's interesting. And then later on you revisit it and you're like, okay, let's try this. Right. And it just sort of led you to, and then you're just like, well, I'll see if anybody wants to buy it. Throw it on Etsy. And now you have a niche market. Fascinating because that to me is the creative mindset. That idea of I'm going to follow these impulses and see where they lead me. And sometimes they don't. I mean, I'm sure you've had many failures
Oh,
too.
for sure, yeah. And the thing with lasers as well is, you can create pretty much anything on a laser. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of different products that people have in laser world. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously I follow groups on social media and various places, and there's so many different things and so many rabbit holes that you can go down. And I've gone down several of them and
Mm-hmm.
then decided, no, I don't need to be making more of those. They're not selling well, or it's not my space to be in. And yeah, but the fact that I can make all this stuff doesn't necessarily mean I should. So, I've made like pins and I've made bookmarks and I've made like little sun catcher things. And a lot of people do those things and then they're super popular. And if you get lots of people doing their own versions of that, then great. My thing is the scientific instruments. So
Mm.
I've got the astrolabes, I've got other things as well, nocturnals that tell the time by the stars, Volvel, like lunar Volvel calendars, different things, and they've done fairly well as well. But because I've got all those things on my Etsy store, that's where people go to find those. Whereas they're not looking for bookmarks and they're not looking for sun
Yeah.
catchers. So you kind of have to say, no, I can't do all these things, narrow it down into your own space.
Yeah.
So certainly for business wise anyway, I mean, obviously I've made other things and I've done things for my own purpose and pleasure. So,
Yeah.
you kind of balance it out, I think.
And I think part of that is when you have a setup like you do, and I think technology is amazing. It's gotten us to the point where you can have your own little R&D in your house. You can like
Yeah,
dream things up, you can make samples, you can make certain things, you can test them out, and then you can put small amounts online and test the market, right? So
that's
you don't
right.
have to like
That's
do
right.
all of this work and put all this money into like creating these things and then just to see if people like it, which is
Yeah,
really a unique time to be alive, at least since the Industrial Revolution. But
it really
definitely,
is. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'm
Um,
I'm lucky because I've branched out. I've got a 3D printer here. I've got a fiber laser which does metal things, which I'm still getting to grips with. It's fairly new, but those three machines together allow you to do all sorts of things. And that iteration that you just described, I mean, I did that with the sundial. I had a version one. It went on Etsy, and I thought it was okay. And then a couple of customers had some slight issues with it, so I thought, okay, it needs redesigning. So I went back to the drawing board, improved it, modified it, put that version on Etsy, and people seem happy with it. So, but it's
wow.
that small evolution, I'm not putting hundreds of them out there before I find this out.
Yeah. That gives you such an edge. Like this is the thing we always talked about in the beginning of the digital revolution was
Mm,
that because of this, it's sort of an equalizer. A small independent creators or business people have an edge because you have that agility that larger companies don't. I want to ask you because actually since the last time we recorded, this has come up sort of in our group chat. And I've seen some other things online about it, and I'd love to have this conversation with you, which is that there's a sort of growing resentment toward people in the creative or artistic community toward people producing things that they see have very little craft.
Mm,
Like the people that go to these craft shows with their like 3D printed things and try to
yeah.
sell them for like 45 bucks. And I'm curious to know, as your friend, because I get to see kind of behind the scenes of all this stuff, and I know the level of thought and creativity that goes into it, right? Like,
Hmm.
yes, you might make something like these boards, these beanbag things that you were making, right? Yeah, that may not be like a world shaking design, but then you've painted it in this beautiful way that is completely unique. So you're adding, you may make things or use machines
Yeah.
to make things, but you're also adding an enormous amount of labor to either embellish or make them more interesting, unique, valuable, whatever.
I see exactly what you're meaning. I mean, and I do find this all the time. It's you go to markets and people might be there with laser stuff or 3D printed stuff. And I know from looking at what they're selling that they've gone onto Etsy, they've bought files, they've gone and taken them, churned them out, assembled them, and selling them. And if you're looking for a wine bottle holder or something like that, or one of those signs that people seem to love with the cheesy sayings on and all that, those people are your friends because they're making all that stuff. But everything I make, I design.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I do a lot of clocks as well. And I mean, yes, they're laser cut, but they're all my designs. And I would do the same if I was 3D printing stuff. I mean, I use my printer for parts. So the sundial has a lot of printed parts. Some of the clocks use 3D printed hubs to hold the motor. And then I laser cut the actual clock face itself, that kind of thing. But if I was making, like, sometimes you go to a market, you see a table full of dragons and creatures that have all been 3D
Yes.
printed. And again, they're pretty much all just getting these files off of like Thingiverse or somewhere. I mean, there's a bunch of sites these days that have 3D printer files, and it's great. You can grab stuff. I mean, I've done it. Like neighbor's kid has a birthday, I print something out and give it to them. It's like whatever. For that kind of stuff, great. Why not? But if I'm selling stuff, I want it to be my stuff, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where the creative process comes in. And that's, I think, the pushback in markets is they haven't, not every market like organizer has fully appreciated the difference between people churning out files and people actually creating their own stuff, but using machines to do it. I mean, woodworkers, they're not like hand sawing every last bit. They're using, tiles or I don't know what they use, woodwork stuff with machines. So,
Yes,
but
exactly.
power tools.
Right.
So, how is, I mean, I get that there's obviously a whole technological, uh, I mean, these days you can start to add AI to that question as
Yeah.
well. It's like how much
Yes. Yes.
AI generates, and that's a whole nother thing. And how long before we start seeing artists that show up to markets with like AI generated paintings, inverted
Mhm.
commas. So, there's all that kind of thing to look out for. And I get that it's a fine tightrope, but I am adamant that everything I make and that I sell is going to be my own creation because that's the only way I know how to work.
And I think that the real crux of the matter is that you're not doing this primarily as a source of income. You're doing it because you love to make these things, and because you are a creative and scientifically minded person, you love these challenges that you make for yourself. And then you sell them. And this is a really hard thing to be able to discern as a buyer. A lot of us are still not clear about all of these new technologies. So we don't even know the questions to ask somebody if we
No, that's
find
very
them.
true. Very
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to do a lot of explaining if I do a market and people come along and they see, I mean, clocks are clocks, although you would be shocked and horrified at how many younger people don't know how to read an analog clock these days. That's like, oh my God.
That is
But
shocking and horrifying, actually.
it really is. Yeah, I've been surprised. But then they look at the astrolabes, and of course, the usual question is, what is it? And you can see the people, they come along, they either go, I have no idea what that is, I'm just going to keep going, or they're curious and they want to, they're like, what is that? And then you can start to talk to people and explain what it is. And then some of them say, oh, so is it laser cut? And it should be fairly obvious that it is laser cut and engraved because it's very detailed and precise in
Yeah.
its instructions. So I don't know if I mean you could probably do it with a wood burner if you had a really steady hand, but that is not me. So yeah, you get different people with different expectations, different experiences, I suppose, in what they've seen or what they haven't seen. So they figure it out, or you can explain it to them. But yeah, people don't know the questions a lot of the time, and that's fair. Not everyone does. So
I would like to see some way, the artistic community is still very much digging in their heels and saying, we don't want this technology. We don't want it. We don't even want it. Right.
mm,
And yet it's being adopted and used everywhere and I don't foresee it going away. So I'd really like for us to switch it up and start talking about how do we certify things? How do we verify things? How do we say, or how do we have disclosure? Like if you're a writer, can you say, well, I used AI to make this piece of my, I used it for the cover, but I wrote the book, like this kind of thing. There has to be a way so that people because I want human made things. I don't
yeah,
mind
and
if
I
they're
think
using
most
tools.
do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the whole point of art for me. Art does
Yeah.
not exist outside of humanity. It
Uh-huh.
simply does not. It is a product of humanity. So
Hmm.
anything that I don't care how pretty it is or how interesting it is, if a human didn't make it, it's not art. I'm sorry. I have a really hard line there, which is not to say that there's no value in any of these other things, but I want that disclosure. I don't want to pay money for something or consume something and with the idea that this was made by a person when it was not. And I think that that's a really I think it's an easy thing to do, but we would need like some kind of standards to say, if you're a maker, which pieces, like I love the fact that you make parts for the things that you build on your 3D printer. That's
Hmm.
brilliant. And to me, that's actually even more work and even more labor intensive than just buying these parts wholesale from China, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And so, but just that kind of disclosure, I think, would really help all of us move forward together and preserve the value of the human creator, but at the same time, allow us to experiment and try things and use these tools as tools. I mean, back in the day, you look at every time new technology comes around, you remember the dawn of the internet, right? And there were
Indeed.
people that were like, I'm not using social media. I'm not getting on the, and now everybody's fucking using
And I
it.
was the same. I didn't touch Facebook for about the first 5 years of its existence. I was like, I don't know about that. And then eventually, of course, I got suckered in, and because all my friends are on there and yada yada, and there's family on there that I wouldn't be in touch with otherwise, and you know how it goes.
I do. I do. And so, like, it just the reality is, this is where we're going. We must
Yeah,
have some control over it. We must. I'm just not the person, like, I'm not the legal minded or the organizationally minded person that can say this is how we're going to do this. But I really wish somebody would step forward and be like, we're going to create maybe an organization that says, that has these standards. And they
yeah,
don't even
like
have
a
to be like,
certificate of authenticity kind of a deal, or
yeah,
some.
yeah. And
But then I
like
suppose
I
who
just
gets
feel like
that?
that would be really valuable because it's
Yeah.
not going to go away and we are going to be continually bombarded with it. And the problem is it's going to improve. And I don't want that to be our sole determination of what is creative excellence. I don't want AI to be the standard of creative excellence. I
No,
don't.
not at all.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk about planes.
Okay.
Switching gears.
I can talk about planes all day long.
I know you can. And this is a really interesting thing about you because you're a girl,
Yes, last time I
right?
checked.
But you are such a gosh darn like plane nerd, right? Like you just
Oh,
are
women
into it,
fly too.
which is like I respect it. Like, and I'm not saying girls can't do that. I'm just saying I, as a girl, growing up in like a very sexist society, I didn't get access to this kind of machinery, right? Like
Well,
I
I
like
didn't
my
either,
parents,
honestly. I mean, I wasn't, around planes as a kid. The reason
right?
I'm into planes is my dad, he was always into planes. And if one would fly over the house, he'd like dash out to side to see what it was. So I kind of ended up dashing outside with him to see what it was, and he would teach me what the planes were. And
Uh,
then back then, when I was a kid, we used to live fairly close to it's a tiny wee village called Fairford in the UK. And every 2 years, as it was back then, they would have the International Air Tattoo, which was this huge air show. And it still is a huge air show. And these days, it's the Royal International Air Tattoo, and it runs every year. But back then, it was a big deal because it was a 2 year thing. And of course, when you're like it's a 6 or 8 year old kid, 2 years is an eternity for the next one.
yeah.
But we would go along, and it's this big military air show, and they have people from all over the world. Different air forces would bring stuff, and it was this absolute pageant. And it was this wonderful thing that I was exposed to as a kid. And that was really the only air show we did. And looking back and having learned a lot more these days, there was a ton of air shows going on around the country, but we just didn't go to them. So, but that was the one back then that we did. And it was great, and I just had this general exposure to planes. And then when I was an older teen, my dad did get his pilot's license, and we went up a few times. And he took friends up, and then I went off to university, and he kind of stopped flying after a few years because it's pretty expensive in the UK. And he was just like, "Yeah, I'm kind of done spending all this money." So I think some point around maybe while I was at university or just after was kind of when he stopped flying. And when I came out of university, I was, I guess I went with Alan to Cambridge in the UK in the east of England. And we were, boyfriend, girlfriend back then. But we went and lived in a village called Bolsham, which is just south of Cambridge. And that is right close to another village, there's lots of villages, called
Uh,
Duxford, which has the biggest World War II air museum in Europe. So so of course we go along to Duxford, and I start taking photos because there's all these shiny things to take photos of, and they have air shows several times a year, so we went along to some of those. And then I needed to take photos in the air. You needed a bigger lens, and then you needed a bigger lens, and I got this 400 mm lens for my camera, and I'm taking pictures of all these planes, and I'm having a great time. And then that kind of led into taking photos at fly-ins. So a fly-in is basically where an airfield will have pretty much like an open day for pilots, and people show up in all kinds of different planes, and they have like a burger or a cake or whatever they're offering, pancakes. In this country it's pancake breakfasts, and back in the UK there was definitely there was an airfield called Shipdham, which had a fattening puddings fly in. So people
what?
show up. They had
That is
about
the most
12
British
cakes
thing I've
on the
ever
table.
heard.
People would show up with cakes. So it's like, whatever works. So, and I ended up reporting on these fly-ins in the east of England for a then fairly new magazine called Today's Pilot. And a friend of mine was at that time, I think, deputy editor of it. And he would encourage me to go out and, take pictures and do a little fly-in report. So I did that for like a couple of 3 years. And then we would, travel around and report on this stuff, and it would get into the magazine. And I was like, yay. So, so that was all kinds of fun for a few years. And then eventually we moved to the US. So things changed a bit at that point because everything's so much more spread out in the US, and it wasn't the same accessibility
Yeah.
with fly-ins because they exist here, but they're so much further apart, and it takes a long time to drive to them because for reasons, I've still yet to get my pilot's license, so I don't get the chance to fly to these things. So it is what it is. But
Yeah.
but I've been, fortunate in other ways here, and I've been able to fly in different things. And I love to fly in different types of aircraft, and I've been very fortunate over the years. I've flown in quite a few different things, warbirds, little tiny things, gyros, all kinds of different civil aircraft. Even one US military aircraft just before they retired it. It was
Wow.
T 43, I think it was. It was basically a 737 conversion that they used for navigation training. And just before they retired it, they had a couple of media rides, and they invited me onto one of those. I'm still not entirely sure why, but I was like, yeah. But I helped the guy out with the report that they did for the military magazine, so he used my photos and that. So yeah, it was, been a lot of stuff over the years, and it's been great. But I just love planes. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
So.
So that's interesting because we just don't have the same plane culture in the US. I mean, perhaps there that's true. Like maybe in some smaller niche areas, but like growing up, we're car people. We have
Hmm.
little kids collect gazillions of cars and whatever. And when we think of planes, we think of either enormous, passenger commercial
Hmm.
jets or the kind that rich people have,
Right.
right? That are just like really, that are really expensive and just sort of inaccessible. But it's so interesting to me, and this is something that has occurred to me since I met you, which is that there are many, many different kinds of aircraft that
Hmm.
are really accessible,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah,
That
much
many
more than you
people,
think.
I mean, it's not like a cheap hobby. Obviously,
No,
there's cost there, but you don't have to be a millionaire to have a plane.
no.
You don't have to be a millionaire to get a license or whatever. And I think that that's a really cool thing. And I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because we did car manufacturing for so long in this
Well, you
country.
did planes too. I mean, both countries have had their share of aircraft manufacture. And it may just be what you've been exposed to, because most
That's
people
true,
generally probably are not exposed to small aircraft.
right?
And honestly, most people in the UK are not either, and you have to go looking for it. But
Huh.
there's a lot of people doing it, and certainly once you're involved or you meet a few people in that world, there's a lot more than you think it is. But it's probably the same with cars. It's like I don't know too much about car culture, but I see car shows around, and there's obviously a lot of things that show up, and there's probably as many different kinds of planes as there are different kinds of cars, in all honesty. There's just much, much fewer numbers of them.
Mm.
So, you'll have like there's an experimental category with planes, whereas it's, if you buy like a commercial plane like a Cessna or a Piper that's come off a production line, that's like a commercial light plane. But then the experimental category is the stuff that people are building in their garages. And you can do that. You can buy plane kits and buy and build them in the garage. And I plenty of people do that. And the end results are fantastic. But there's so many different kinds of kits and so many different little designs that a guy might have made one or two of, and that's it. But it's another type that exists in the world, whereas cars tend to be more mass produced. And I suppose, obviously people modify cars and things, but they still probably start as a mass produced factory item that then someone's gotten hold of and changed. Whereas
Yeah.
planes tend to be built from the ground up and designed to be what they are. So
I
it's
think
just
there's
different.
also I think there's also a perception that planes are way more dangerous, which I don't think is true. I actually feel like cars are probably way more dangerous,
Yeah,
right? Just
I think,
just by virtue
yeah.
of the fact that there's so many of them and everybody has access. Whereas to own a plane and to fly a plane, it's a pretty like you have to be pretty determined and trained and
Oh,
educated about
absolutely.
how to
Yeah. I
do it.
mean,
Yeah.
obviously, everyone's a very, good level of basic training that you have to do. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people with pilots' licenses, so I know enough to know that I don't know much, if you see what I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
since I have not been through it myself, but I've had a lot of exposure to the general world of it,
Mhm.
and lots of rides with people that give me the controls, which have been fantastic. So I used to do, and I still do, photography for the Sport Air Racing League, which is a thing that exists in the US for, basically it's run what you brung for planes. So they have a cross country air race, which will be a point to point race. So you start from an airfield and you might fly to a bridge and then to another airfield and maybe a lake and back again. And it's a timed
Yeah.
circuit, or and you can fly anything you want, as if it's as long as it has a propeller. They don't take jets. But let's be honest, there's not many people clamoring to fly jets around these things anyway. But they have different classes for different performance capabilities of the planes. And there's a lot of classes because there's a lot of different kinds of planes. And I was lucky enough to live close to the guy that used to run this league. So he would put me in the right seat of his plane and we would fly to races and I would take all the photos and I was happened to be there for the very first race, which was probably about 12 years ago now, if not more actually, maybe more. So I've been involved ever since, really. So, but again, it's got to the point where the races are sufficiently far away that it's kind of hard for me to get to them anymore. So it's because it changes from year to year as what races are run where. But it's been fun, so I've had a lot of exposure to small planes through that as much as anything, and a lot of time flying to and from the races. And yeah, my friend, he would, give me the stick and say, right, go, follow the magenta line on the GPS and keep it straight and level, and off you go, and you've got control. And and that would be it. And I would be his
Fun.
autopilot. So so yeah, it
I
was
got
really
to
fun.
drive a semi truck once.
Oh yeah. Well, I've never driven a semi, so there's something I want to try.
No, it was a similar thing. Our car broke down in the middle of a desert, and a trucker came by and got us. And literally, like as he's driving down the road, he gets up and he's like, "Go ahead, take the seat." So I sat in this truck and like drove it down
Okay.
the road. Yeah, not nearly as exciting as flying a plane, but I was pretty
I don't
jazzed
know.
because I was only 16. Yeah. Um, so you have thousands, literally thousands of photographs of
Oh yeah.
planes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where do they live?
They mostly live on my website, which is futureshocks.net. And yeah, I think I don't even know how many pictures are on there, but there's a lot, tens of thousands. And it goes back over 20 years now. So there's it's mostly organized by events. So if you go back into the years, there's a menu option that gives you everything by year, and if you click on a year, it tells you everything I photographed in that year. Most things, anyway. There's a few things that haven't got on there, but most stuff's there, and there's stuff from all, mostly the UK and US for obvious reasons, but there's stuff there from around and about, and there's also a page that gives you, or several pages that gives you aircraft by type. So if you're looking for pictures of a particular type of plane, it's like a database driven thing that I built, well, 20 years ago, and I've kind of modified a bit since, but it's still pretty much 20-year-old code, but it still hangs in there and, and does what I need it to do.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
people are interested in planes, I think it's a great resource just because it's the photos are a really great quality. And then because it's organized in a way that people can look for things and it's
Yeah.
just hanging out there on the internet. It's
You
like one of
can
those
nerd out
things.
on planes there, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll link it in the show
Okay.
notes. Um, so aside from making the little uh, laser cut airplanes when you first got your laser, do you
Hmm.
do any other sort of plane related creative work besides, in addition to the photography, which is I would consider a creative endeavor
Yeah,
also?
I mean, I've drawn planes. So when COVID hit, obviously fly-ins and shows went away, and I was kind of like, what do we do? So I started drawing planes, and I put those on like t-shirts and mugs and stuff. So that's all on my Etsy store as well. But I haven't actually done a lot of that in a while. But there's a lot of like warbirds and stuff like that there. But it's been kind of fun. It's all vector art. So again, and yes, I'm using machines, but
Yeah,
I do it with a Apple Pencil on my iPad. So it actually is hand drawn. It's just in hand drawn with vectors, if that makes
yeah,
any sense.
it does actually. Yeah,
And I find that quite therapeutic. I go back to it now and again and mess with it some more, but it depends what mindset I'm in a lot of the time. So yeah, I haven't
yeah.
done it late, but there's a bunch of them up there. So.
I like this about you, Joe. I like mainly because I am the same way, where I will just sort of I have many, many interests and I have many things that I like to do. And then I'll just sort of listen to whenever I'm tugged at it. Like, I haven't done that in a while. I need to pick that up again. Right. I need to do this some more.
Uh,
And a lot of times it's not for anybody else's benefit but my own.
yeah.
Really. I mean, it's just something I like to do and I want to do it and I want to be good at it. So I want to keep doing it. And it's not, I don't make a lot of money at it and whatever. So I wonder if that's just a type. I don't know, because there are some creators who I think get really into a thing and
Mm.
that's what they do and they're just immersed in it. And I don't think I can be that person.
No, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think I'm the same way because, I mean, like I said earlier, I did the fused glass for a long time and I kind of, you know, gone away from doing that. And like last year, I tried acrylic painting for the first
Uh-huh.
time, and did a few things with that. And then just this year, in fact, I finished yesterday a cross stitch piece, and I've never done cross stitch before. I thought, oh, try it. My friends of mine seem to enjoy it, so let's give it a go. So I took 2 months and did a bit each day. I didn't specifically set out to take 2 months, but it just ended up being that long to do it. Yeah, did a bit each night watching TV, and here we are. Now I have a thing, and I'll get it on the wall at some point. But
Yeah, I
but
saw the
like
photos
now
of
and
that. It's
again,
amazing, actually.
thank you. It's not my design. That's the thing. It's like if I do any more, I'm going to have to do my own designs. I mean, this was somebody else's design, and then you make it, and it's very nice, and it shows me what can be done. But and oftentimes that's what I need is like I need a stepping off point. I need to be shown what can be done or shown the way, and then I'll take it myself and make it mine and roll with it.
Yeah,
But sometimes you just got to try new things, I think, and just keep those creative mindsets open and not be too niche into just one thing all the time. Because I get bored, and honestly, I think most people probably get bored.
yeah,
But you got to try new stuff.
agreed. But here's the weird thing, Joe, is that all the stuff that you try, you seem to be really good at.
Thank you.
No, maybe I would feel better if you would just share some of your failures once in a while. No,
I've
but
got a
really, like
drawer
that
full
cross
of.
stitch was fabulous. I've done cross stitch for years. It's beautiful, especially for the first piece. Like what?
Well, let me just say the instructions were very good.
Oh,
I'm actually
please.
very pleasantly surprised. The kit that I bought, I mean, I had no idea what I was buying, but the kit showed up and it's got all the stuff in it that you need. It's got all the thread, which they call floss, apparently. And
Yes.
then it came with like a million tiny beads. And I thought, oh, I didn't know there was beads on this when I bought it. And they're the tiniest things you ever saw. And
Yeah.
half of them are down the sofa now because I keep dropping them. So but luckily they supply loads of them and they supply loads of thread. And the instructions tell you all of the little stitches and how to do it all. So it's actually really, comprehensive and from having never done it, and then you can make a thing like that. So that was actually very good.
But you
So
can actually really screw it up too. Like I've done,
you
like I'm
go.
telling you.
But let's just say I saw it. The mistake, like some stuff isn't placed right, and so I had to kind of make adjustments to make the next bit fit and that kind of thing. So
That is another thing I noticed about you over the years is that you are, despite being so engineer minded, and maybe it is because you're an engineer, I don't know, but you are pretty flexible in your learning. Like you have the ability to, and I'm going to just chalk this up to you, who you are, and maybe the way you were raised, because it's a pretty rare characteristic for anybody to have, where you sit down and you're like, I'm going to try this thing. And then suddenly it doesn't go to plan and you don't give up. You're just like, okay, well, now how do I make it work? How do I make this work? Right.
uh-huh.
And the results can sometimes actually be even better. Right. But you don't stop. I have so many half-assed, half-finished projects just laying around that I'm like, I start doing them because I am that person who I don't want to learn vicariously. I'm going to do it and see if I like
Mhm.
it and learn as I go. And then when I realize, oh, this looks shitty or I've messed this up, I'll just abandon it
I've got
because I
my share
haven't been.
of those.
Really? Do you? That
Oh
makes me
yeah.
feel better. Okay.
Or things that I think, yeah, I really don't need to fix this, but I've got other things that take priority and it kind of sits aside for ages and
Okay,
that kind of
good.
thing.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I've definitely got some of those.
Okay. I have a lot of those. And I think it's just I don't even know what I would call that. I think it's just an ethic. I think it's just like a creative ethic or a work ethic to see, like, are you willing to push past your own sense of or fear of failure and sense of like, I I'm not doing it right or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
which
there's
is
two
a hard
layers
thing.
to that as well, because there's, especially when you use equipment, there's the part that says, are you using the equipment right or wrong to generate the result that you need? And that's something else. But then there's the artistic side, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. If it's something artistic, it's easy to think that you failed at something or that there's a right and wrong in art, but there really is not. There's just your way of doing it, and
Yeah.
everyone's different. And you put two paintings side by side. Like again, we had this in our group the other day, where two paintings came up
Yeah.
side by side with the artist of one of them, and then she'd seen this other one, and the same subject matter, but very different interpretations. Neither of them is wrong. They're
Right.
just different.
Yeah.
People seem to get hung up on, oh, my thing might look terrible because, this, that, and that. It's just your way of doing it. You can refine your way of doing it and get more to what you would like. But it's nothing's right or wrong in art.
Yeah. I mean, that is a really easy thing to say, and I say it all the time, but when it comes down to it and it's you doing the art, there's this like I was telling somebody the other day because I'm writing my first novel that I am amazed that I finished it or that I'm this close to finishing it. And there are so many times that I almost abandoned it. And the
Mm,
reasons why were not because of the writing. It was my emotional sort of hangups around it.
right.
This idea that, what I've put down here is not, doesn't look like what this person does, or it's not what I thought it would be. And you also get really caught up in like these feelings of self-worth, like, why would anybody want to see this, and all of these things that clamp down creativity. And I can preach this all day long about, like, people, it's the wrong way, go with the flow, do it. But then when I'm doing it, I find myself just like having an emotional meltdown over it.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. But maybe we all need to cultivate a little bit of the sense of not giving a damn of what other people think. This is what we're doing, and this is how I want it to look or how you want it to read. And there's this fine line, I suppose, between that and accepting constructive criticism, perhaps.
Sure, sure.
So I don't know. I guess maybe it's down to each of us to figure out what we're willing to accept, or how
Yeah,
much we want to be pushed by others' opinions or that kind of thing. I don't know. It's a tricky one.
that's why. And I want to finish out our conversation by asking you something that I like to ask most of my guests, and that's about creative community.
Mm.
And I think that as an artist or as a creator, it's so important to have a trusted group of people who you do take feedback from, right? Who
Yeah.
can give you constructive criticism, and you can trust that it's because they understand you, they understand your goals, they understand the kind of person you are and what you're trying to make, and they want it to be the best. And so they're going to give you that kind of feedback, as opposed to, everybody's fucking opinions on the internet. Hey, what do you think of this? You got 8 gazillion opinions, right? And the idea is that as a creator, you know what you want to put out into the world, but it's a very, like, the idea of translating what's up in your head into art or writing or any of these things is really difficult. That is where the work comes in, right?
Uh-huh.
And so having people around you who can reflect back to you, who can not only give you encouragement, but can say, hey, you told me that this is what you wanted to do here, and I'm not seeing that. Is there a reason for that? Kind of
Right.
prompting and
Right.
encouraging people to pull more out. Um, how have you found creative community, and where do you seek that out? Like, how do you seek that out, especially being a British person living in a small town in the middle of Texas?
Um, well, I will say that our group has helped a lot, and it's nice having a bunch of folks that are supportive around. Laser wise, I spend a lot of time on Facebook groups. There's a several laser groups, and honestly, a lot of that is more about how you do a certain thing, or you might go looking for advice and techniques and that kind of thing. but it's a good place to learn or even get, somebody saying, oh, you need to go and look for that on this website, So it, groups I find are a very good way of learning about stuff, but there is support to be had there if it's a decently run group, I suppose. Some are better than others, but
Sure.
isn't that always the way? Beyond that, I suppose, I mean, on the being a British person in a small town in Texas, there's actually several of us here, which is surprising, but there's-
Wow.
we have a little running group, which is actually how we got here in the first place. We used to do these 5K races at breweries, and we met another British couple that were doing these races as well, and they lived in the next village over or town over. I suppose they don't really have villages, do we? Um, and so when we were looking to move out of Austin, and we would come and visit them and figured this was actually quite a good area. So that's how we ended up here. But there's also a running group here that we ended up being part of again through these guys, and there's more British people, and there's they're not all British, but there's it's a surprising number of us given that it's such a small town. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's all a good bunch of folks. So you get that support from having a community and not really creatively as such, but just the fact that you've got, people around, I think helps in mentally in many ways. So
Yeah.
it makes a huge difference moving to a town where you already know people. I mean, when we moved across from the UK in the first place, didn't know anybody. It took ages to meet people, but you know, the difference was quite striking. So
Yeah.
and we still
So
have friends in Boston, so we go back and forth. In fact, we're heading there later today. So
but and then the other thing you had mentioned earlier, which I thought was really interesting, is like with the astrolabes, you found this sort of niche market, but within that market, obviously there are people who are willing to talk to you. You've learned
yeah,
things from them,
yeah.
and I think that informs your work as well. And
Oh,
I
it
think that
definitely
there's,
does. Yeah, and I've
yeah.
had good input from customers on how to improve them. My earlier ones, if you took one of my first astrolabes and compared it with the one that I sell today, then there's definitely improvements and little tweaks and modifications, and most of it has been suggested by customers. So, it's been great having that feedback, and then I can make the product better and,
Yeah.
satisfy people, in a better way. And, sometimes people will ask me for strange little custom modifications, and I've been able to do that. So
But
it's
you're
good.
ultimately, you're the one, like when it comes to taking feedback from your market, I think you're the one that has to say this is valuable and this
Mm,
is not, because I think it is very daunting for creative people to put their work out there and then have 80 gazillion different types of feedback and opinions thrown at them, and they're
yeah.
like, I don't know what's
I mean,
useful and
I
what's
think
not.
with the astrolabes, it's slightly different because while I've creatively controlled the look of them, it is a scientific instrument that has to be designed in a certain way or it's not going to work. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not like I'm creatively designing the markings much because otherwise it isn't going to be an astrolabe.
Right.
So it's more stuff like the sights on the back. They used to be little kind of a funny shape. It's kind of hard to describe, but it would mean that it would rock when it sat on the table. So a customer suggested, why don't you change the shape of it so it sits flat and it has a better notch in it and that kind of thing. And now it sits flat and it doesn't rock. So stuff like that, little tweaks
Yeah.
and mods and there's been a few changes to the shadow square on the back is something you can change a little bit and change the markings on. So that's had some attention over the years and just some other stuff, but it's not really a creative endeavor so much. Whereas me, the clocks I've had some feedback on, they are more creative because that's obviously my stuff. Yeah, not a ton of feedback. People have generally liked them, which has been good. But yeah,
Okay, well, this is this is so interesting. I have to say, like, you are such a unique person in my life. I don't know anybody like you. And I love that. I love that because I'm a collector of people. Like, I find interesting people and I'm like, I need to know this person. I need them in my life. And so it's really rare to find somebody like you who is just so into everything that I'm not. Like you're just so into everything that I'm not. And yet I really feel like I resonate with you as a creator and as a person who, likes to put things into the world. You have this mindset of like, I want to know more. You're always learning, you're always interested in, you're that person that sees something at the market, you don't know what it is, and you're like, oh, what is that? And you ask the questions, right? As opposed to being like, I'm
Yeah.
afraid of it. And I think that's a really great thing. But also, all the science, all the design, all the stuff that you do is just not even in my realm of thought. And I appreciate it. I appreciate the amount of thought and effort and heart and creativity and good intentions that you put into your work. I think it's just such a refreshing thing in a world where people are hell bent on making the most amount of money from the least amount of work, that you are willing to take time to make things special.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, any closing thoughts for our vast listening audience today?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. Go out and make good things, I suppose.
Yay. Yes. It should also be noted that Joe and her husband produce beer.
Well, he produces beer. He's very good at producing beer. So no, but Alan is very technically minded as well. I mean, he likes 3D printing as well. I mean, he's been heavily involved in computer hardware industry, shall we say, until a few years ago. So he's technical. He's way more technical than I am.
Oh, wow.
But oh yeah, he's like, yeah, you think I'm technical.
Wow.
No, he definitely is very, very technical, but he does like his beer and he loves to brew and he does make good beer. So
Wow. All right. Well, I need to come out and visit y'all and see
yes, you do.
your wild and crazy lab and uh,
Yes, yes.
enjoy some of that beautiful hill country scenery. But
Yes,
thanks
it's a
for
nice
joining me
place to
today, and
be.
thanks again for coming back and
Oh,
re-recording with.
absolutely. Well, thank you for having me back and not just wa washing your hands of the whole thing and
Oh gosh, never, never. Okay, I'll be sure to link to your stuff, your Etsy store, your photography website, anything else that we've talked about in the show notes. And if there's ever anything cool or interesting that you want to share, hit me up and I will share it out with my network as well.
Lovely. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.